Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of the book, Dear Coach, no other than Miss Sara Erdner.
Hello.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Sarah. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Absolutely. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Dr. Erdner, and I'm an a clinical associate professor of kinesiology and health sciences, specifically in sports psychology and coaching. So I teach graduate level courses. And I'm also obviously the author of this book, and I'm a certified mental performance consultant through our Association for Applied Sports Psychology. So that's a little bit about me.
Miss Sarah Erdner, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world and hoping for more and more and more empowering books like this to come. What personal experiences or moments inspired you to write Dear Coach, and how did they shape the story direction?
Absolutely. Well, during my dissertation, I was very interested in the coach athlete relationship. I originally was interviewing just coaches because they were easier access for research purposes. And then I pivoted and was actually starting to gain athletes' lived experiences because it was not only what I wanted to actually do, but what coaches were interested in. And so that's when I sat down for my dissertation. I interviewed athletes about their experience with the coach athlete relationship, and that's really where the dominoes started to fall leading to this book, because many of the stories that were shared for my dissertation, even my committee members really encouraged me to almost even just skip the part of getting this published in research journals because a lot of people aren't going to read that. And so that's I went out and met with a publisher who really loved my idea, got an editor, and that's where we have the product that we have today.
Interesting indeed. Miss Sarah, what the central themes or messages do you hope readers will carry with them after finishing the book?
Yeah, I wrote the book from an empathetic standpoint. So I know maybe if a coach reads like Dear Coach, what I wish I could have told you, some of it might be like, oh, I don't really know if I want to read that. It might call me out. But I wrote the book in a very empathetic way, to call coaches into a larger conversation, because some of the major themes that came out were the concept of empathy, empathizing with coaches and how we are not providing them with the resources they need to optimally perform. That looking like matching a 1-to-1 ratio. Like we have athlete mental health initiatives, but there's really nothing out there that's supporting coach mental health, coach well-being. So starting coach mental health initiatives, and then also diving deeper into what the concept of culture means. A lot of coaches use the concept of culture prescriptively. So they'll tell an athlete, this is our team culture. You either abide by it or you don't, and then that means you're not a good fit, versus understanding that a culture is made up of every person that's on the team at that time. And anytime you add or subtract somebody from the group, that's going to change the team culture. So it's a living, breathing entity. It's not something that you impose upon someone. And the athletes were very much speaking toward that they didn't want for culture to be prescribed, but they wanted their own authentic selves to be able to determine what the culture was for that season or in those moments.
Indeed, team culture, people, team culture. How did you develop the coach character? Were they drawn from real life figures, or do they embody a broader archetypes?
So the coach character, I think, speaking about kind of the cultural, which the underpinnings of that is multicultural psychology, is I think a coach's character or just understanding who they are, them being able to show up authentically, is really them revisiting who they are, creating a stronger relationship with self, interacting with themselves in ways they might not have before. So that could be um, them looking at themselves as a cultural being. Where were they raised? What narratives were they learned? Did they learn growing up about different demographic groups, about themselves, and how might that influence how they show up for themselves and athletes today? So I feel like for character, it's a very nuanced thing. It's not necessarily a one size fits all, but more so helping the coach find where their own psychological safety is with self And then that's better going to enhance the relationships that they have with the athletes that they're working with.
Miss Sarah, what obstacles did you encounter while writing, and how did you navigate them creatively or emotionally?
Oh, that's a great question. The a story comes to mind when you ask that about. I was teaching a methods of coaching course to some students in person, so prior to COVID, and I was talking to them about how as future coaches they need to step back a little bit more and allow the athlete's voice to come through, and that could look like providing the athlete's choice for them to be able to choose what gets done in practice that day, etc. But as I was telling the athletes or the students about this, I stopped dead in my tracks and realized that the way I was writing the book was actually counter to what I was teaching. So, the first draft of the book is I would offer a letter and then I would go in as the quote unquote expert and basically tell the reader what they should get out of that letter and provide research support. But I walked out of the room that day with the students and I called my editor and I said, I know this is probably going to cost me more money to have to make this pretty massive change, but I decided that I wanted to gather more letters. I wanted to shut up a little bit more as the author of the book. And now I have the where it's a letter and then I provide open-ended questions for the reader to be able to gather from each letter what they resonate with. My favorite quote is a book read by 1,000 different people is 1,000 different books. And so the book is really written in a way to try to call everybody into a larger cultural shift, into a larger conversation. So it was something for me, it was a challenge because it really forced me to have to engage in the level of vulnerability, the level of awareness that I'm asking for coaches and sport as a whole. And it's okay if we see that we're making the mistakes and we might be perpetuating a system that's not necessarily creating psychological safety. And that's the first step is just having the awareness and acceptance and then making the change like I needed to do with the book where I stepped back a little bit more and allow the reader to come in and interact with the letters. And then in part three, I obviously provide some of my thoughts on if I was provided a seat at that table to discuss how we can make this change so that all stakeholders in sport feel psychologically safer.
Very well said, Miss Sarah. Beautifully articulated. Very well said. Who is your ideal reader for this book, and what conversations do you hope it sparks among them?
I think off the bat, it could be easy to say the ideal population are coaches. I have had, though, since the book has been published, a lot of business executives reach out, and I've worked with their teams. So if you think about the concept of Dear Coach, what do I wish I could have told you? Or Dear Coach, this is what I wish I could have said but never did. You can put any title into that. So, Dear Boss, Dear Parent, Dear Friend, what do you wish you left unsaid? And so obviously coaches and anybody within the sport realm is the central audience for this. I've had a lot of athletes read this book and demonstrate or tell me that it's been very therapeutic. They feel they're not alone. They're not the only person that feels this way. But I've had a lot of sport administrators read it and also be very empowered by some of the shifts that I'm um, promoting within the book. So I really feel like parents of athletes can also read it. It'll help them empathize with their athletes a little bit more as well. So it's more overarching than what I originally thought. I originally wrote it for coaches, but I'm seeing that the audience is a lot more widespread than that.
How did you weave together narrative entertainment with the book's deeper lessons about mentorship or growth?
So, how do I weave in narrative? Will you say that word one more time?
Yes, how do you weave together narrative entertainment with the book's deeper lessons?
Absolutely. And I think with me having the letters from these athletes is them sharing their narrative. So I consider myself more of a facilitator of space where I want to facilitate dialogue. And so having the athletes share their stories and offer it within a book, i.e., call that entertainment, to where we can get more lived experience in one space. and then hopefully sparking more narratives where coaches are either thinking about their own narrative as an athlete turned coach and what maybe has influenced their coaching philosophy. Coaches reaching out to their athletes that they're currently working with, even their assistant coaches, sport administrators, and opening up this dialogue of what they wish was unsaid. So I feel like the narrative is woven just throughout this entire project, and hoping to encourage other people to really seek out their own narratives, but not only their own narratives with self, but how that narrative with self influences the narrative with other people.
Did you follow a structured outline, or did the plot and characters reveal themselves as you wrote?
The book definitely takes a structure. There's three different parts to it. So the first part is thank you letters. So that was something that was actually surprising to me. And what I mean by that is when I first started this project, asking athletes to write a letter of dear coach, um, what do you wish you would have said but never did? I assumed I would get a lot more critical letters, if not all critical letters. And I got a pretty big grouping of thank you letters, which I thought was very interesting because that speaks, I think, to the larger lack of communication happening. So it's not just, oh, well, communication happens when the good is going on and we're just not addressing or we're avoiding the more critical. It's that I think that there is a large lack of communication across the board. So the book opens up with part one, which is the thank you letters, where they provide more detail on not only thanking the coach, but being specific about what they're grateful for. Part two are the more critical letters. This is what you did that I didn't like and what I would have rather you have done. So they are very critical in nature. I did coach some of the athletes. They'd come with me with a letter and be like, I didn't like that you did this, you sucked. And I was like, that's valid. Let's actually think about the purpose of this book being educational in nature. So that coaching process, not necessarily me leading them to say anything, but it was me really digging more out of them, was really therapeutic for not only myself but for them. And then part three is where I come in. I share my own dear coach letter, and I give some ideas on if I were to suggest what changes we should make and how we should pivot in sport. This is what I would suggest.
Were there scenes that felt particularly vulnerable or cathartic to write?
I think in a lot the letters that were more critical in nature, there's some heavy ones to read. There's some on eating disorders, there's some on cultural discrimination, some on just really challenging what the word professionalism means and how that could actually make somebody feel uncomfortable. And so the letters themselves and what the athletes brought were, I believe, everyone in their own right is vulnerable. And it does touch on some vulnerable subjects that I think a lot of people, even in our political climate, at the recording of this episode, can be very touchy. And I think those are things, the touchier it is, the more that that's actually letting us know we need to lean into it more, and that we actually, like, that's where the medicine's at, that's where the good juice is. And that's what the athletes are wanting. They're saying of coaches, we want you to lean into the sensitive more. We want you to lean into the touchy stuff more, but we also understand that if you don't do that with yourself intrapersonally, that if you don't touch the hard, sticky subjects with yourself and process those in therapy, maybe, then how can you show up for us in that way? And that's another thing that's really influencing me promoting the coach mental health initiatives, is that if we have mentally healthier coaches, more emotionally mature coaches, that's not only going to just help them in and of themselves, but it's going to help them also show up in the relationship with athletes a lot better.
Very inspiring. Miss Sarah, very inspiring indeed. Based on the book's insights, what advice would you offer to a new coaches, mentors, or writers?
Absolutely. In part three, I actually offer I kind of joke I'm a professor, so it's not an assignment, it's not a homework assignment necessarily, but it's a reflective practice. And one of them is, as a coach, you were likely an athlete at one point. And neurologically, we have mirror neurons in our brains. So those mirror neurons are what they're why we mimic the social behavior that we're around. So, and if we don't intentionally intervene on those social behaviors we've learned, we will likely coach the way that we've been coached. And we might think that we're not coaching the way we've been coached because sometimes we might mask it as something different. But the important thing is that you were an athlete at one point. So if you were to write a Dear Coach letter of this is what I wish I could have said but never did, write that letter. What would you say? And then step two, and a more vulnerable step, and again, this isn't a homework assignment. You're not submitting it for a grade. I'm not redlining it. You're not giving it to anybody else. This is just between you and yourself. Is reread that letter you wrote to your coach as if it was an athlete that wrote it to you. How might some of the things you wrote in that letter be true? How might you be maybe enacting things that you didn't like that your coach did? They might just be masked a different way. Maybe there were things your coach did that you really did love and enjoy, and it created psychological safety for you that you're like, oh, I could probably do more of that. So, step three is then creating a list of what should I start doing, stop doing, and keep doing as a coach as it's influenced by this reflective practice that you just did. So I think for new coaches, this could be one way that you can help build your own coaching philosophy is to revisit what it was like to be an athlete and then vulnerably think about what are actions that I can do intentionally that can maybe be the same as a coach I had because I really appreciated what they did for me, or how am I going to make sure I don't do the things that the coach did that actually caused me a lot of grief.
Indeed. Thank you for your advice, Miss Sarah. And as an author, what are your short term and long term goals?
I think my short term goals are just right now. I actually just got off of a pretty gnarly 2 year medical journey. I just had a kidney auto transplant. So some of my short term goals are just getting back into the swing of things professionally, re promoting this book, like being on this podcast, which has been lovely for you to have me. My long term goals are to just continue to let that kind of domino effect of these podcasts, hopefully inspiring other people to want to jump on, if you want to call it the Dear Coach bandwagon of cultural change. And then long term, us working with national governing bodies, working with maybe even at the international governments if they have authority over the sport network there, on what we can do to make changes so that not only athletes are psychologically safer but also coaches. And so getting on those roundtables, having the discussion, creating policy, if you will. So that's kind of the long term goal for me, hopefully.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Sarah, and looking for more and more and more empowering books like this to come. How did writing this book reshape your own understanding of coaching, mentorship, or human connection?
Absolutely. I mean, even in the story I shared earlier about when I the first draft of the book to what it is now, it really changed me philosophically, not only as a coaching mentor, as a mental performance consultant, but also as a professor, on how can I create a space, and more so instead of dictating what the space is, creating space where I facilitate a space for people to be able to create connection amongst other people, be reconnected with their own story. And so I very much feel now the shift that I've made is that everybody has the answers within them. It's just a matter of facilitating a space for them to become in contact with that versus I am the expert, I have the answers, and you're going to come to me and pay me money so I can tell you what the answer is. And that's been a very powerful shift to me. It's been a challenging one because when you've been working in one worldview for a while, for decades, and then shift. But it's been a powerful shift where I've actually been able to see higher levels of optimal performance come from it. And some of what I tell my clients, and this isn't, if somebody who's in business marketing hears me say this, they might not agree, but I let clients always know that my job is to make myself obsolete in your world. And that might not, that means there'll be a day where we're not working together and maybe you're not paying me anymore. And again, the business marketing person might be like, oh no, you always want to keep them coming back. But again, I feel like if I truly do believe that people have the answers, then it's just me helping them know how they can find the answers themselves, empowering them to do so. I become obsolete because they become more empowered in themselves. And I really, really love that relationship that I've been creating.
Miss Sarah, how do the relationships between characters evolve and what these dynamics reveal about growth or vulnerability?
Absolutely. I have to give a major shout out, round of applause to the athletes who wrote letters. They are all confidential. I took out all identifying information just because the letters in and of themselves are very vulnerable, and there's a lot of power struggle within sport. So the coach to athlete relationship, sport administration to athlete. If we're talking college, for example, there's scholarships on the line. There's their opportunity to get a college degree, whatever it might be. And so I really wanted to protect the athlete in this book by keeping it confidential so that they didn't run into a coach maybe finding out that it was them and then a coach retaliating against them. So the and because they knew it was going to be confidential, I had the athletes reread through their letter, and if there was anything else they wanted me to take out that they were too scared to share, then I would respect that. And so I believe because of the confidentiality, the level of vulnerability was heightened in these letters. So I do feel like there was this book has a lot of powerful message packed into a small space. There's a lot of very powerful punches in a small area.
Miss Sarah, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and of course, my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 and love letters in third season, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101. Movie 101 review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in each first season. So please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Miss Sarah, what lasting impression do you hope Dear Coach leaves on readers, both personally and culturally?
I hope personally that it's more so what resonates with them and that they honor that at a individual level because it's so nuanced. I mean, it's their lived experience resonating with a letter, so I can't necessarily dictate what is going to resonate with them, but whatever does, it's valid and it's true, and let that guide their coaching philosophy. At a cultural level, I would really love to band together with other people who are passionate about coaching education and how the content of Dear Coach can actually help to reshape the culture of sport to be a psychologically safer, mentally healthier, emotionally more mature space that everybody can benefit from, coaches in and of themselves, but also coaches as a vehicle to help athletes grow as humans and as performers.
Dr. Sara Erdner, thank you so much for sharing this coach to the world, and of course for sharing your knowledge to the world. Can you please invite our listeners to support Dear Coach itself?
Absolutely. So you can find, I have a website called dearcoachbook.com. And you can go on there. You can buy the book singly. It would be an author signed copy. You can buy the book in bulk as well from there. There's also something I really want to highlight is that there is a free ebook download as well that my publisher and I were able to work on getting that so you can get at least free access to the book. So if you go on the website dearcoachbook.com, you can order the book in whatever fashion you want, download the free ebook, or you can even reach out to me via email to discuss doing one on one mentorship, either coaching education stuff. We can do a book club type thing. So there's a lot of different things that you can engage with on dearcoachbook.com.
Yes, indeed, people. I support Dr. Sara Erdner because if you support her, more and more empowering books like this to come, more and more empowering coaching to come. So, Dr. Sara, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.